Hello and welcome to the Canadian Football Countdown. I'm Ryan Coop alongside Michael Garrell and Trey Colbeck here with our Week 2 CFL recap, episode 150 of the Canadian Football Countdown. Big milestone episode here. We're going to talk through all of the games from week number 2. Lots to get through here tonight. We'll give our players of the week and our updated power rankings here as well before I bring in the other members of the panel. I do want to mention we are a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network. And as always, want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. Now let's bring in the other members of our panel. First, it's the great Michael Garrell. Mike, episode 150. You and I have been here from the start. Can you believe we're hitting 150 episodes and haven't been booed off the internet yet? How are you doing tonight, Mike?
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I remember you and I were sitting right behind where I'm sitting now, recording episode number 100, which seemed not all that long ago, and now we're back at 150. Promise you 150 is not going to be as long as number 100, but in all seriousness, I'm dead.
Right on. Happy to have you back after a couple episodes away here, Mike. And joining us here tonight as well is the great Trey Colbeck. Trey, haven't been around since episode 1, but definitely a part of the current and a part of the future of the podcast. Happy to have you here as always. How you doing tonight?
No, I'm doing fantastic, boys. Yeah, coming around 9 or 10 for myself, I think. It was a great weekend. I think I told you guys I had a family social. Those are always fun out in the Hicks. And had a lot of horse racing to watch this weekend. If you guys followed me on Twitter, I think I got a little annoying yesterday, but that's okay. Great to talk football now. It was a good weekend again. So really excited, guys. Let's go.
Yeah, lots of fun here tonight recapping week number 2. Adam is off tonight, but he will be back on Wednesday night with Trey and myself to preview week number 3. Really, I just didn't want to hear Adam's Colorado Avalanche smack talk tonight, so I gave him the night off from the podcast. But no, all jokes aside, he will be back on Wednesday. Well, let's talk some football here, boys. Week 2 kicked off with the Montreal Alouettes facing the Toronto Argonauts, first game for the Argos this season. They take the narrow 1-point victory out of this one. A game that ended with a little bit of drama when the Montreal Alouettes kicker David Cote missed a 21-yard field goal to win the game. Let's go to you here, Mike. What stood out to you in this game between Montreal and Toronto?
Well, I don't know where to start, quite honestly, Ryan. I mean, I think one of the more serious kind of reflections, if you will, is that if you took this as part of the first 2 drives of the game, you would assume that Andrew Harris was after, a Fred Reed in BCS performance from all those years ago. But, it was the game that had a little bit of everything. And in the CFL, I always say expect the unexpected. But boy, oh boy, I mean, I think I was kind of joking when I said I think it was the season preview show or one of those shows that I was on, Montreal didn't finish in last place. I still don't think that it's going to happen, but if you could pinpoint ways to lose games in heartbreaking fashion, they say good and bad things happen in threes. What's going to happen with number 3? I'm scared to find out, but also intrigued to find out because last I checked, 2-0 Saskatchewan comes to town Thursday night. And yeah, I know this is a recap show, but I'm really intrigued by who's going to be taking that opening snap behind center, because all of a sudden Vernon Adams is not necessarily the VA that we thought, at least what I thought, that should be up for MOP. It could still happen, but I don't know what to expect. We can get into the quarterback discussion because I think that's rightfully the right place to start. Never mind the missed field goal at the end. But yeah, this to me was the game that I watched from start to finish without interruption, and probably I left with having the most questions out of anybody.
Yeah, we are. We're live here tonight on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, etc. Put your comments in the chat and tweet them at us, etc. We'll be taking them all night long. I forgot to mention off the top of the show, thanks to our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV. Check out facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB for more on that. But Mike teed it up. The big storyline here for the Alouettes and the loss, Trey, is the quarterback situation here. Vernon Adams Jr. pulled very early in this game by Coach Kahari Jones. Just 2 of 4 passing for 14 yards, and he gets the pull. Are you surprised it came so early in this game? And what do you think of how Trevor Harris did when he came in?
No, I think that's going to be the biggest surprise. One of the biggest surprises ever is that it caught me off guard. I was coming back from the washroom, and then I see Trevor Harris in there, and I'm like, well, there goes my fantasy. So I think it was crazy. And, it was absolutely absurd. I'm sitting there, and I'm watching. Okay, for guys, I'm sitting there with my girlfriend who kind of knows football but doesn't know it like we know it, and I'm going off. Why is this happening? Like, why the hell is Kahari doing that? Why is he doing this? What's going on? What's going on? I don't care what the commentators are saying. Like, I'm going nuts. And she's just looking at me like, why you care? And I'm like, because it's fantasy points, boys. But yeah, but to be serious, Trevor Harris, I think he did fine. I don't know if you want to spread it out. Yeah, he was much more over. He was 60% on the day, and they pulled Vernon Adams for being 50%. So I don't really know why the pull was necessary. I think if they left Adams in, he probably would have had similar numbers. And it's not like Harris had 4 touchdowns and came away with a big win. He had a pick, and he got them in position for the field goal. But I don't know. It was a weird game to me. I never really felt like Toronto was playing bad to let Montreal get back into this game. But then at the same time, they only scored, 19 points, right? Yeah, or 20. Sorry, 20. It was a weird game, guys. And, Harris, the way Harris played, you would have thought he would have had 3 touchdowns and, because he got 18 carries and I think he got into the passing game a little bit. Yeah, with 3 there. So, it was a really weird game, but yeah, for sure, the number one story is the quarterback situation. And I don't know, Kahari being a quarterback, you think maybe he'd been a little bit more have a little bit more leash. VA's been his guy, but yeah, I'm really interested in what you guys have to say too about it.
Yeah, I think it's a desperation move by Kahari Jones, and I think it comes from the pressure from Danny Machocha, the general manager. I think it comes from the pressure of some of the comments from, owner Gary Stern. And we talked on our preview show Wednesday last week about, Stern's comment about how his team was going to go out and kill the Argos. Well, that didn't exactly happen, and maybe he eats a little bit of crow for that. I mean, I'm still a huge Gary Stern stan. I love everything about his new presence on Twitter and him trying to figure that out. But he's put some pressure on Kahari Jones. There's been a lot of talk of him being on the hot seat coming into this season. And I think it's an overreactionary move to game 1 didn't go as you planned. Like, you really didn't give Vernon Adams much of a chance here to pull anything off before you're like, okay, yeah, I got to put Trevor Harris in. Like, Mike, do you see it any other way, or do you agree with me? This is a desperation move for a coach who's worried about his job.
That was my thought on Thursday night when the moment happened. But, gentlemen, might I remind you, what position did Kahari Jones play as a player?
Quarterback.
Right. So quarterback. So I'm led to believe that I want to be careful how I phrase this because it could come out wrong. If you're not careful here in the way I say this. Trevor Harris is a former quarterback. Kahari Jones is a former quarterback, most notably with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. the coach generally has a pulse for what his team is in game, during the game, after the game, in the week leading up. I wonder if in hindsight this had nothing to do with pressure, but whether he saw something from Vernon Adams that said, okay, this clearly isn't working. We have an owner that says we have to win. I expect results. Is it a combination of both? But I can't help but wonder if Charlie Jones saw something in Vernon Adams. He knows he's got a 1B matchup that's proven. Why not just try to flip the momentum? I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that there's a lot of pressure in Montreal, contrary to what the owner says. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I was owning a football team and my money, sizable money, was being used, I'd expect some results too, I would think. Losing wouldn't sit well with me when we're losing, particularly the first two games on the road, where you feel like you did get a few more bums in seats, if you don't 1-1 or 2-0 going into a home opener against Saskatchewan. But I found funny, and everybody seems to kind of be along the same wavelength here. The owner in the box wearing Stanbat's jersey. Okay, yeah, you can't pick favorites as an owner, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that was just a show of solidarity for his player. It's just very interesting. And, hey, finally the CFL has some personality. Victor Twee, Jerry Stern has been on Twitter of late. Can't be a bad thing for a lead with looking for publicity. And I can't remember what the tweet was. Some kind of highlight or analysis thing that Farhan Laji was tweeting out about TSN or something like that. And the response was, well, if it benefits the Alouettes and it benefits the CFL, I'm in. We need more people like that. And hey, if you invest massive money, you expect return on investment. Not necessarily everybody losing their jobs. If I'm an owner, I want my team to win too. It's that simple. And I think it's going to come. I think if you want to set the expectation, but wins are a must, then yes, set the bar high.
Well, in terms of paying top dollar and expecting results, perfect segue here. If you did that with Jake Winnipeg in fantasy like myself, you were disappointed. Held off the stats sheet, 0 catches, 0 yards for a guy who was expected to be, again, a top receiver in the league this year. Very disappointing start to the season. We'll see if he bounces back. We'll see how the quarterback situation for Montreal plays out in the coming days and throughout this week. I want to talk about the Toronto side of this game here. First time we've seen the Argos in action. One of the things we talked about for them coming into this game was the new faces, right? Andrew Harris, Brandon Banks, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, not a new face, but it's his team. He's the face of the franchise now. I thought they didn't play too bad overall. We talked about Harris already, a monster game. Brandon Banks got his first touchdown in the double blue, and it's still just as weird as ever to see him in those colors. Same thing with Harris. And I thought Bethel-Thompson, 269 yards, a touchdown and interception, not a barn burner of a game, but he did enough to get it done here. Trey, what do you think of McLeod Bethel-Thompson and his supporting cast here?
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to my buddy. He commented Chetan Takur on Facebook there, old buddy there. So I'm actually glad he's watching. If he's still watching, so hey, man. But yeah, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, I thought he played really good, fairly well, for to be expected. Again, I'm kind of a believer in him, so I was expecting a little more. And especially when you have a guy like Harris and Banks, Banks had some nice catches, and Harris was, I mean, he's the exact same Harris I remember seeing last year and the year before, or the season before and before that. So, he doesn't seem to have missed a step either. So I'm actually surprised they didn't win by more. Like Montreal should not have had the chance in the first place to have that game-winning field goal. Boris Beatty also missed 2 field goals, right? So that's a big 6 points there, I think. Yeah. So, I like Bethel Thompson, and I think I expect more of them going forward, and hopefully they get on a roll. Mike?
Big thing for me is what happened here with Andrew Harris. I'm hoping that was just precautionary, but I can't imagine, too many people being too excited about Andrew Harris being taken out of a game that's, very much in reach. Like, this isn't sitting a die because you're up by 17 with 4 minutes left, and there's not a great chance of the other team coming back. Andrew Harris sat on the bench in a 1-point game in the fourth quarter where his team could have used them to grind out some valuable clock. That might be the number one storyline here in Toronto, or in Toronto, I should say. It's going to be interesting because I thought I saw some pretty good things from his backup there, which was a Canadian guy that they picked up at the draft, but he's no Andrew Harris. And isn't it funny? We had this discussion about, and I, for one, will take a lot of heat and accept the criticism that when I said that Bethel Thompson is not a good quarterback. Ryan, you have heard me say this on multiple occasions, how I am not sold on Bethel Thompson. I have not been in the past. It's amazing what happens when you put some weapons in front of him and he does some protection, what he is capable of. And maybe there's something to work with here. But as lucky as the Argonauts got, and I'll use that term with the missed field goal, they deserve to win. They needed to win because you did not know what the future of Andrew Harris looks like. Now, granted, everything looks like it's going to be okay, which is good news. But you also had a chance to jump out of first place into first place in the division because nobody else, despite having the week 1 bye, and up to that point had won the game. So, light up on the East Toronto by getting a big victory. Their first game of the year at home as well. So, advantage Toronto for the East so far. And, as much as we talked about Montreal deserving to win, to me, this just was a great football game with one team being fortunate enough to win. And, it just goes to show that there is that opportunity despite, that convert light field goal, which is what it really was, give or take a few yards. Nothing's a given. So play to the end. Every yard you hold the team back of a team-winning field goal is a opportunity to present what happened. And do I think that just really quickly, for people that seem to think I'm railing on Montreal, do I think their season's over at 0-2? And the way they've lost these 2 games? Absolutely not. The reason I am so hard on Montreal is I expected so much from them, despite saying that they would finish in last place. So I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I'm also kind of I see a team with a lot of potential, but I can't figure out Jake Winnipeg for the life of me, not getting a target or not getting a reception. Like, I have to do a double take at the statistics just to make sure. But you know what? Montreal gets a big division loss. Toronto gets a big division win. We'll see in November where these 2 teams are.
Yeah, shout out to the Argos for leading the East Division with a 1-0 record through 2 weeks. Did not see that coming. As we get ready to move on to our next game here, first of all, Trey, we did, you, myself, and Adam on our weekly preview show, made our betting picks for the week. How did we do on Toronto, Montreal?
Yeah, and I've been posting them on Twitter, and I hope everyone likes their little emoji that everyone got. I think Ryan's got the turtle. So, I thought it was great. I was 3.5, Montreal plus 3.5. Adam took the -3 on 3.5 with Toronto. Ryan and myself took the plus 3.5 Montreal, and we got the week started right. I think that would have moved us to like 5-4-1 or something like that on the year, and Adam would have went to 3-2. So yeah, that's how we started off. But I know we want to go on, but I just want to say the Harris point. I think you take him out in that because in the division where 2-3 teams are going to make it out of the 4, you want Andrew Harris playing in October, November. If he does something stupid June in a first game of the year, and he's done for the year, like we've seen now, a couple big injuries, like then their season changes drastically. I think one loss early against Montreal doesn't change as much as Andrew Harris gone for 3-4 months. So that's my take, but we can move on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point there. Let's move on to game number 2 of the week. It was a rematch from the week before, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Ottawa Redblacks. Never easy to win 2 straight games here against the same team, especially at the start of the season. But Winnipeg takes this one 19-12, pulls out the win here again. Looked like Ottawa was maybe going to get a chance at a comeback here late in the game, but a roughing the kicker call on a punt seals their fate in this one. A tragic end for the Ottawa Redblacks. Big storyline to me in this game was, again, almost another game where I thought Ottawa was the better team for a lot of it. Jeremiah Mazzoli, 331 yards passing. Devontae Williams, great game on the ground, averaging 7.1 yards a carry. But the problem is, Ottawa couldn't finish. That's the second straight week, I think, where Jeremiah Mazzoli's thrown over 300 yards, close to 350, and they still, they had 12 points to show for it in this one. No touchdowns through the air, none on the ground at all. 1 touchdown in 2 games there. Like a disappointing loss here. Again, Ottawa looking like a good team to me, but not getting it done when it matters. And maybe that's a credit to Winnipeg here for getting being a team that finds a way to get it done. Trey, what did you see in this one from Winnipeg and Ottawa?
Yeah, hopefully we don't have too much of our Manitoba showing in this one. But to be honest, this is the most, again, being a Bomber fan, I'll be honest, this is the most upset I am at a 2-0 start. Like, I'm happy, but this is like the least amount of happy I could be. I think this team has greater potential on paper. Now we're going to see, is it Ottawa that's maybe better than we think, or is Winnipeg maybe not as good as what everyone thought? I'm surprised the CFL power rankings still have them 1. And that's very shocking to me. So I don't know if that's just respect or what. But one point I really want to go, I think they need to run more. And, they gave the ball to Brady Oliver a fair bit, but Augustine got the same amount of yards and half the carry. So I think they need to do a little bit more back there. That's my take on Winnipeg. Ottawa, Jeremiah Mazzoli just needs to get touchdowns. That's the only thing missing from his game. No picks, over 300 yards, 71% average, 0 touchdowns. Like, you got to get 1 or 2. And then again, if you got 1 or 2 of them, that's a different game. If you change some of those field goals into touchdowns, right? Like, that's a big difference. So that's my other side. And I think that eventually Lapo and Mazzoli, and the offensive coordinator, I'm not too sure who it is in Ottawa, will get something going. So I'm not too concerned about Ottawa. I still think they have a good shot at the playoffs. And especially if Montreal's missing, 12-yard field goals, Ottawa's going to be on their heels in the standings all season long. Mike?
Yeah, you know what, guys? I don't want to get my shorts in a knot about this kind of game because I totally feel that Ottawa is one of the top teams in the East. If we worked on the assumption that Winnipeg is one of the best teams in the West, which everybody seems to suggest they are, this might just be a good, hard-nosed early season battle of low-scoring games and defenses that, take a lot of, anger on being scored on. You talk to some of those Bomber defenders, they don't like being scored on. It's natural. Would I like to see more from a Bomber offense? Absolutely. But I think, guys, we could point to one thing.
Oh, I think we may have lost Mike there. Let's try to add him back in here.
Sorry,
there he is.
Yeah, they use Johnny Augustine in some passages, and I think that kind of threw a curveball to the defense.
Oh no, we lost Mike again. Okay, Mike, we'll get Mike to reconnect here. In the meantime, I'll just pick up here on what we were talking about. Johnny Augustine did get in the first half for a 24-yard run in there, but I think that was his only play of the first half. He got 7 carries in total. Kind of want to see them give him the ball as the workhorse here a little bit. Let him go with it. Brady Oliveira hasn't stood out directly here through the first couple of games. Why not give Johnny Augustine a chance here if you're the Bombers? As we add, I think Mike is here and will hopefully be showing back up on screen in a second. But the big thing that on the Winnipeg side, and then I do want to talk more about Ottawa, the big thing that's shocked me through 2 games so far, Trey, is it's the Greg Ellingson and Dalton Schoen show. And I don't think we expected that at wide receiver to be, again, another week where we're talking about a quiet Rashid Bailey and a quiet Nick Dembski really not doing anything here for Winnipeg. And the 2 new guys leading the way. What do you think of this from the Bombers' kind of game plan and receiving core?
I'm actually not that shocked. Like, yeah, you want to see the guys Bailey and Dembski play, but Ellingson's got a very good record. You didn't think it'd take him that long to fit in and be maybe the main guy. And you and I talked during the preseason game about Dalton Schoen. Like, are you really surprised after that game that he's getting the ball a lot? Like, maybe when you first saw the roster and you're like, who the heck's this guy? Well, maybe you're a little shocked then. But yeah, when you're leaving IG Field after that preseason game, that's the only name that really stuck out in my mind. So I'm not too shocked about that. I think the other guys will get the ball, but you know how defenses go. They focus on guys and it leaves others open. There's only so many players you can fully cover. So you got to get the ball out when you can.
Yeah, and Greg Ellingson, that's 2 straight games with a touchdown for him to start the season. Fitting in nicely, a nice new addition here for the Bombers to have him fit in, and instant connection with Zach Collaros. Collaros didn't look fantastic in this game, 15 of 22, 228 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception, but he did do just enough to get the job done, and really that's the way of the Winnipeg quarterback, right? They're never going to go out and light up each and every week, but they do find a way to get it done. 19-2, I think it is now as a starter for Zach Collaros in Winnipeg, which is insane. Over on the Ottawa side of things, this loss has to hurt to not come out of this with at least 1 win out of these first 2 against Winnipeg. And it's kind of interesting. What are we going to see from Ottawa going forward here? Because really for both of these teams, we don't have a ton to go off of because they played 2 games against the same team. So Ottawa's offenses looked real good through 2 games, yardage-wise, against what was one of the best defenses in the league last season, but we think has taken a step back. But how does Ottawa move on from here? Where do they go next in terms of just cleaning up those few small mistakes that they keep making in these games and finding a way to end up on the bad side of the results?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking because looking at their schedule, their next game's BC, Saskatchewan, Hamilton, that sounds disgusting, right? So I again, on the other side, I said the 2-0 is maybe the most unimpressed, the 2-0. I'm going to say Ottawa's 0-2 is maybe my more impressive 0-2, more than Montreal, who shanked the kick and Right. And then Edmonton is just Edmonton, right? So then everyone else has some wins in there. So, yeah, I'm not too worried. We see the East, not other than Toronto. I don't think anyone has a win in the East, right? So, they got a long season left. They might have a bumpy road, but they don't need to finish first or second to get in the dance. We know what teams can do finishing third, and maybe they'll even finish fourth. Like, I'm still going to hold on to that crossover. It's a lot of season left, so I'm not too worried about it. We've seen East teams finish 9-9 and win the Grey Cup, right? So I think that's what this team could be. Is that team that gets hot late. Mazzoli starts finding the end zone, like I said he needs to do, and yeah, that I think Ottawa definitely be conversation in November.
And we're still waiting for William Powell to make his first appearance here with the Redblacks as well, right? I mean, Devontae Williams had himself a good game with 85 yards on the ground, but William Powell, if used to his proper ability, is a whole nother level here to add to that Ottawa offense, and I think open things up a lot. What I like so far is we're seeing, I feel like, a lot of the Paul Appley's game plan we saw in Winnipeg, where you don't really have a go-to receiver. I mean, it seems like it's Jalen Acklin or it's Darvin Adams, but Nate Bahar, a perfect 7 for 7 for 91 yards. Like, how often do you see Bahar at the top of the receiving charts for your team? Great game for him. Justin Hardy, kind of the new addition nobody really talked about coming into the year. 7 catches, 10 targets for him, 55 yards. Shaq Johnson had a good game last week. This week he had a big long catch there. Adams was solid again. Acklin was solid again. I like how they're spreading the ball around. I think it's going to be, they just got to find a way to put the ball into the end zone, and I think they'll learn to do so over the season. But I almost draw the comparisons to a Trevor Harris-led Edmonton Elks offense from the past couple of years, where they had all the tools to succeed. Greg Ellingson, Darrell Walker, et cetera, et cetera. It seemed like they were going to be stacked. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone and put up points. So that's something you got to see, I think, a little bit more from Ottawa here on as they go forward in this one. Last week, one of the major things we talked about on the Winnipeg side was the play of Winston Rose. Rough week 1 for him. I believe he got burned for another long one in this game, but the second week here, you also had Jackson Jeffcoat back on the defensive line. What did you think of the play from Winnipeg's defense here?
I'll give Winston Rose some credit because I think he leads in defensive tackles right now. So I don't know if that's a good thing. That means Ottawa definitely wanted to pick on him, right? So I think he did okay. Like, he did a little better if I'm focusing on him, because I expect better from him. Like, a guy who spent some NFL training camp time, was a pretty big part of the 2019 Grey Cup and stuff. So, a guy I expect more out of. Now, to the whole defense, I don't know. We were talking about this again in our group chat. There's a lot of things on the group chat we need to maybe actually post more of if we don't have time to talk about it, because we do make some good points. Like, what Saskatchewan leads the league in sacks, and they almost have more combined than most of the other teams. Like, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. And Winnipeg should be one of those teams. I have not been impressed with defensive line play, maybe 6 or 7 of the teams in the league this year. Like, it seems like I think that's one reason why Mazzoli was throwing for days. He had time, and even if he had a little pressure, he just rolls out because he's got some athleticism. So I don't know what's going on, if it's a league-wide thing. Seems like, other than Saskatchewan, no team's really figured out how to get to the quarterback yet this year. So I'm hoping that turns around for the blue and gold. Their secondary is always going to be bend, not break, right? That's kind of what the Richie Hall scheme's been. And they ought to, like we said, Kolarski's going to go out there if he needs to win if he needs to get 19 points, he'll get 19 points. If he has to get 30, they'll find a way to get 30. We've seen that here in Winnipeg the last few years.
Yeah, looking at some of the defensive stats, like Willie Jefferson through 2 games of the season has 3 tackles and no sacks. I don't know if we've ever seen, and it's 2 games. A lot can change, but just interesting to see kind of no major performance on the board for him here early in the season. Maybe one of the best defensemen for Winnipeg is one of the more underrated guys, and that was Kyrie Wilson. Everybody talks about Adam Bighill at middle linebacker, but Wilson had a good game there. He got a sack in. I think Deatrick Nichols is filling in nicely in the secondary there. So, the bend but don't break Richie Hall defense strikes again for a second straight week where they give up a ton of yards. But again, I think it's one touchdown, which was that early touchdown last game last week in the first quarter, I think it was. That was the only offensive touchdown I believe the Bombers have given up through 2 games here. And I find it interesting to compare it to last season, because early last season, first drive of the game, Jeremiah Mazzoli hits Jalen Acklin for both with the Ticats for an easy touchdown to start the season. Then the Bombers locked it down. I don't think they gave up a passing touchdown for 3 or 4 games after that. And we were talking early last year about absolutely how stellar this Winnipeg team and defense was. This year, I feel like we're not saying as many good things as we are about the Bombers' defense, but statistically, in terms of points given up, it's much the same. So are we maybe, being a little lower on the Bombers here through 2 games than we should be when going back to compare it to last season?
I don't know. I'm kind of in that mixed feelings with it. Like, I think there was a lot of hype about this team, so I think the expectations were going in were higher. But I think we're seeing probably what their schemes are. They don't need to win by – they're not going to do the 59 blowout against Edmonton. I mean, maybe they will against Edmonton, but they're not going to do that against a team like Ottawa. They're going to manage the game. They're going to punt the ball, field position. They have trust in their defense, right? So they're not going to make risky plays, and they're going to nickel and dime. Other than that, I think I'm just going to run the ball more, like we talked about, or give it to Augustine. But other than that, I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle. Like, maybe it's, again, my hometown bias. Obviously, I want them to win, 60-0 every game and throw for 500 yards and do all that. But, they're 2-0. They're right in the mix of it with the West. The West is going to be hard. Like, early wins, what's a 3-way tie for first, I guess. So it's going to be insane. So I think they did exactly what they needed to do to win the game. And I'm not too concerned. I don't think they're going to go 18-0, but I don't think it's going to be a sky is falling and, the rest of the games are going to be this close.
I think we have Mike back in here. Mike, are you there? He's still frozen yet again. Okay. Mike, you add yourself back in when you're ready to go. Well, I think we should probably start moving on to our next game here. But before we do that, the betting picks in this one, Trey, I know this one I didn't get right. I went Ottawa outright on this game. In terms of straight up CFL pick'em, my one bad mark on the season. How did we do overall on the picks in this one?
Yeah, like you said, you took Ottawa. I took Ottawa with the point spread, which they did not hit as well. But Adam, the Roughrider fan, took Winnipeg to win, and he got it right at -2.5. So he got the check mark there. I think that would have moved you and me to 5-2. And I think we're all at 5-2 at this point. So again, you're making money if you're listening to this show. Like, that's the main part.
Yeah. Listen to us. We'll lead you to glory. And fantasy wise in this game, Dalton Schoen still such a money value play at a $2,500 play. A lot of Ottawa receivers, a little bit cheaper in price, making some good plays here as well. Let's move on to our next game here. The Calgary Stampeders and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Mike, you are back. I believe you are moving. You're not frozen anymore. We're happy to have you back here to join us as we talk about the wildest game of the week, I think. It starts out with, well, we talked about on our preview show, the storylines once again. How is Dane Evans going to bounce back? He just had the, birth of his, I believe it was his daughter this past week. And would that motivate him to come out and play a good game? And boy, did he light it up in the first half. Almost 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns here early in the game for Hamilton and Dane Evans. They jump out to a 24-3 lead at halftime, and then Calgary flips the script in the second half here and ties the game up, and they go on to win this one in overtime. Mike, what do you think on this Calgary-Hamilton weird game here?
Well, depending on which side of the aisle you stood, that's the kind of half a football game you like, to be honest. Hamilton, you're thinking, okay, the world's, great. Our offense is back. Calgary to no one's, I guess everybody's surprise is everybody's waiting for this demise of the Stampeders to occur. People thought it did, and then, all of a sudden momentum starts to switch, and you have to do amazing things to blow a lead like the Hamilton Tiger Cats did in today's CFL. Just given the checklist of about 10 or 12 items that have to go right, it's remarkable. And Calgary finding a way, and I may have put something in the group chat that essentially the game was over, but I should have known better. I don't know if it's an accident that Kadeem Carey goes out and Calgary's offense finds life. I'd like to think not, but boy, I just can't help but wonder, what Hamilton is thinking at this point, right? Like back-to-back Grey Cups. We find a way to lose, the second one hurts more than the first one. And then to find a way to lose this game, like, at some point to a large portion of that team, it has to be demoralizing. And the moral of the story is don't ever give up.
Yeah, a game that Calgary was not looking good at all early in this one, but they bounced back. You mentioned the injury to Kadeem Carey. Peyton Logan, the backup, comes in. 9 carries, 45 yards, 4 catches for 59. Not a bad game for a backup running back to come in and play, and they flipped the script here. Trey, what do you think of this game between Calgary and Hamilton here?
This was the one I've had, I think I said, soul searching to think about this Calgary team and where do you put them in the, in the West right now in power rankings and everything. And I don't know. This was a tough one for me. I'm watching the highlights again and again. It's tough for me to say if Calgary won it or Hamilton blew it, and maybe it's a mix of both. Saw some missed tackles on Hamilton, saw some things that you think you would be a little bit tighter on a close game. And, it's a tough one. I'm not high on Calgary, but, they didn't, if you see the first half, Calgary is a lot different than the second half Calgary and even the fourth quarter Calgary, really, right? So, they're going to be a dangerous team if they play like that fourth quarter all year long. So that's kind of my intake on Calgary. Hamilton, yeah, it's got to hurt in Hamilton. Like Mike said, back-to-back Grey Cup appearances. Now you start the season 0-2. And they probably don't have much of an easier schedule upcoming either, right? So it's a very interesting game. No lead is safe, and Mike should know better than saying things like that in the group chat.
Bo Levi Mitchell finishes the day 28 of 42, 313 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And it kind of almost seemed, we've talked so much about which Bo are we going to see this season. And last week it didn't look good. Early in this game, it wasn't looking good. Second half, he gets it done. He puts a couple touchdowns on the board, hits over 300 yards, leads the late game drives in overtime. This almost seemed like we saw glimpses of vintage Bo Levi Mitchell here in the second half. And if he can string that together into another game, I think they play Edmonton this week. Should be a game they should be able to win there. Let's get some momentum going here early in the season for Bo Levi Mitchell. You got his star receivers involved here as well. Kamar Jordan had over 100 yards. Reggie Begelton, 47, a bit quiet, but some clutch catches and a touchdown there for him. And, did as usual, spread the ball around everywhere. So I don't know what was said in the locker room at halftime for either of these teams, but and who was doing the talking, whether it was Bo himself for Calgary, Dave Dickinson, but something sparked the Stampeders here to rally back and pick up a win here. And kudos to them for that. Now I want to switch over to the Hamilton side of this. How did this fall apart for Hamilton here in the second half, guys? Like Dane Evans, as I mentioned, was on fire in the first half, 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. He finishes the day with 425, but 2 picks, also a fumble in the second half on a 1-yard plunge that ended up going the other way for a touchdown, and one of the most bizarre short yardage plays I think I've ever seen. Mike, what did you think of how Hamilton started and finished this?
Well, to be honest, I thought they played a pretty close to perfect first half, and then it's almost like they forgot how to play football. A mistake here, mistake there, mistake there, mistake there. It's all of a sudden piling up to a Calgary rally. Calgary to me is, they credit to them. They're 2-0, 2 close wins. Something that'll galvanize a lot of teams. But maybe we're getting to the point where this Hamilton team is not what they were the last 2 years. Certainly a lot of questions. Granted, we're 2 weeks into the season and everybody could rate the Bombers off, and yet they're 2-0 for some of them. Whereas I think the 2 Bomber efforts were, some of the quietest, maybe even all of last year. We didn't have any of these types of games, but that being beside the point, Hamilton is, to me, a lot of questions. There are positives to this game if I'm Hamilton, though, and that is at quarterback. I had Dane Evans in fantasy football in week 1. I did not get a lot of production out of him. I was this close to not playing him again, but you know what? Like great quarterbacks do, they bounce back. But this might be a game of unfortunate circumstance. More than anything for Hamilton. I want to see if this becomes a trend. I'm not overly worried yet, although you never know, right? 0-2 Hamilton, they started like that last year. And how did it end up? Well, an East Division championship, to be precise. So I'm not sure I'm willing to say it's season over for Hamilton, but maybe these aren't the Cats that like to prey on their opponents of years past. But I'll stop short of suggesting that it'll be a trend.
I think Hamilton's going to bounce back. I think we talked about Dane Evans' big bounce back. Tim White had a huge bounce back game. 11 catches on 14 targets for 131 yards and a touchdown. I hyped this guy up in preseason. I took him in our fantasy draft. I had him in my lineup for that this week, where, with no Jalen Ackland, no Brandon Banks, it's Braylon Addison and Tim White are your go-to top 2 guys here, and Stephen Dunbar Jr. as well. But it was nice to see, the top receivers stepping up and playing here for Hamilton. Now I got to talk about the run game a little bit, though, because I want to know for the second straight week, where is it for Hamilton? Sure, Sean Thomas Erlington, Don Jackson out due to injury, STE, Sean Thomas Erlington. Massive game through the air, 7 catches, 9 targets, 72 yards, but not running the ball, just 5 carries on the day. Dane Evans had more carries than your starting running back, especially in a game where you're up that much early in the game. Are we surprised at all, Trey, that Hamilton doesn't run the ball a little bit more here, as you get into the second half to try to eat some clock here and, come out with the win when you've got the lead?
Yeah, it seems like it's a slowly growing trend in basically having 2 downs that some teams go away from the run game, and run game sometimes non-existent in a 4-down NFL game, let alone a 3-down CFL game. So there's a part of me that's I'm a run the ball guy. I'm you should run it at least 50% of the plays, and especially if you have the lead, regardless if it's 3 downs, 4 downs, 5 downs, right? Run the ball. That's football. But again, I'm not surprised with the trend of this because, Calgary didn't really run a heck of a lot either. We were talking about some other teams that don't really run the ball. The teams that run the ball, Toronto with Harris, Winnipeg doesn't even run it as much as they, traditionally have. So not getting on off the top of other teams, but I think rushing, it just seems to be down anyway, except for those teams. If you have a guy like Harris who he's going to pick up, like, he'll pick up whatever he needs to. So, yeah, it's weird. I'm surprised, but not surprised. It's kind of a weird answer.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point that, you seem to see more teams, splitting their carries between running backs, wide receivers even, Hamilton likes to do that. So you've got Poppy White with 2, Braylon Addison with 2, Malik Irons got in there as well. So you get the ball spreading around a little bit here. Heartbreaking loss in overtime for Hamilton. Great comeback win here for the Stampeders. How did we do on the betting picks here in this one, Trey?
You and me had the exact same picks all weekend. So you and I both took Hamilton -1, and Adam took Calgary +1, and Calgary outright won. So Adam turned his weekend around. Yeah, you and I went to 4-3 at this point, but Adam was sitting at 5-2, still making money with any of us. But yeah, Adam had us bested a little bit this weekend.
Apparently, me setting my lineup on the CFL Pick'em website earlier in the week and what I picked on our show did not match, because I was disappointed remembering I had picked Hamilton to win this one. Then I checked the Pick'em website and was pretty thrilled to see I actually did pick the the Stampeders originally there to pick up the win. But in our little betting game here, another loss for us. Kudos to Adam for that one. Speaking about Adam, let's talk about his Saskatchewan Roughriders, who pulled out a 26-16 win over the Edmonton Elks. Storyline for me on the Riders here is that it's a second straight game where it feels like they were the dominant team in this one throughout the game, but not putting those points on the board, and 4 minutes left in the game, much like last week. It's a close one. Edmonton actually leading until about 4:15 left in the game when Cody Fajardo finds Mitchell Picton in the end zone. They complete the 2-point convert, then they add a field goal later on yet as well, and the defense just flattens out anything that Edmonton could pull off there late in the game. But another really solid game for the Riders, but a close one here. Mike, what did you think of Saskatchewan's performance here as they moved to 2-0?
Well, since we're not picking apart Winnipeg for 2 close wins, I don't think we should be picking apart the Riders in this game either. Just to be fair. And you know what? To be honest with you, this would be a moral victory as well for the Edmonton Elks. I know they don't count in the standings, but this to me is about how were the Elks going to respond after being mauled by the BC Lions in week number 1. No pun intended. But that's what happened. The response from Edmonton to me was pretty good. All things considered. I think we owe a lot of credit to the Riders in this one, because it is a trap game written all over it. I don't know about you, but the last thing I want to do is play a team that just lost by 30+ points and didn't really have a good showing on the field. That right away puts me in that position of, I gotta win the next game. To me, that it's just real interesting here, and I don't think we're going to get clear separation until Winnipeg and Calgary play. Winnipeg, Saskatchewan play. Saskatchewan and Calgary play. You can make these preconceived notions about 2 games in, but this Rider team is something to behold when it comes to their stats. I know I sent you guys this in the group chat before the show. Riders have more stats. I think it's 13 in 2 games. That's more than the entire East Division put together. Not quite as much as the rest of the league put together, but hey, I'll tell you something. And, there was the comment in the chat about the Riders have always been a defensive team. That's not a bad way to play football. To last I checked, there was a saying called defense wins championships. Winnipeg rode a defense last year to a Grey Cup. Saskatchewan rode a pretty darn good defense to 2 smooth victories. Offense, give it some time to come around. I think the Riders are playing another trap game this week against Montreal, but I'll leave that for you boys to discuss on Wednesday night. All in all, it's a typical CFL game, right? You're tied. It's tricky. You're in another team's barn for a home opener. Good teams find a way, and the Riders, to me, prove that they deserve to be in the top tier discussion in the West Division. I think we would have had serious questions about how consistent can this team be if they would have lost to Edmonton. So, are the Riders a good team? Yes. We'll see when they play Calgary and Winnipeg. Do I think they're going to be a good team, man? Yes. But I think the common denominator amongst everything here, guys, defenses are ahead of the offense. It's not just in Winnipeg. It's not just, Saskatchewan. It seems to be everywhere where, that massive output minus BC in week 1, which is kind of the outlier to the situation. But offenses as a whole taking a little bit longer to get going. Defenses generally rule the day early in the season. To me, I'm really intrigued here what happens going forward. Dan Clark, to me, is the interesting part because he had a serious injury, broken fibula, I think it was, in the fourth quarter. Really exacerbates the Saskatchewan offensive line situation even more. I don't think you can get a clear indication of how things go from an offensive line standpoint when it happens that late in the game. Now that they have a week to reset. But you know what? I'll give the Riders a lot more credit than some people were giving them online. And I'll also give Edmonton a lot more credit, too, for picking themselves off the mat and saying, for the most part, that week 1 performance, not who we are. Now the next question, guys, week 3 and beyond. We start to learn more about each team each week. Both these teams really excite me in that regard.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Edmonton side of things here yet. But Saskatchewan defense, another solid game here. We talked a little bit preseason about how we were worried about the defensive backfield. Well, I guess you don't really need, to worry about it when the opposing quarterback's on the field, lying on the field, every second play due to your defensive line and linebackers. Trey, what do you think of this performance here by the Riders? Again, strong defensive performance and a late offensive outburst.
No, to tie in what Mike said, he says great defenses. And what do you do against a potential defense or great defense or any good defense? You run the ball. We were just talking about it. They ran for over 180 yards combined with Jamal Morrow and all the other guys, 45 yards on Edmonton. Like, you got to run the ball, especially Western teams. That's how Prairie boys play. Run the ball. That's all you're going to hear me talk. Run the ball and hit field goals. That's all you need to win a football game in Canada, really. And yeah, you have a quarterback who could go for 300 yards, but we see Mazzoli 0-2 and he's throwing perfect games. Run the ball. And I think that's Saskatchewan's success. They're taking a little bit of a playbook out of Winnipeg the last 2 years. You don't need a quarterback throwing for 300 yards. You don't need him throwing for five touchdowns. Just as long as he's not giving up the ball, no fumbles, no weird things like the Dane Evans pickpocket there, no turnovers, and just run the ball down the throat. You own the clock. You have the crowd there. Oh, I guess this wasn't in Edmonton, but, in Saskatchewan, you own the clock there. They have the Pilsners going. You have the crowd on defense. Own the ball. That's how Saskatchewan's going to win the Grey Cup this year.
Yeah, and I like how you talked about the running game because it almost seemed like Jason Maas decided to pull the good version of his playbook out for this one. It seems like he's got 2 versions, one where they never run the ball and one where they run it a lot. And unfortunately, the first one seems to come out more often. Then you get games like this, like 17 carries for Jamal Morrow, and this isn't a game where the Riders are up by a lot and trying to run out the clock. No, this was early on in this game. I think he had like 85 yards rushing in the first quarter and a bit or something like that. I think there was one drive where he had a ton in a row there. I really liked what I saw from Jamal Morrow, in this game, taking on that starting role, contributing in the passing game as well, contributing on returns also for him. Shaq Evans, another solid game, leading the way at receiver. No Duke Williams this week. He drew a lot of the attention last week from the opposing defense. So, it was interesting to see no Duke Williams, no Kyron Moore. Shaq Evans seems like he is very nicely back from his injury that hampered him last season. He's having a good start to the year, and the other receivers chipping in there as well. Adam is here with us in the chat, says, I'm surprised Jones hasn't gone bananas on his D-line for letting so many run yards on them. Let's talk about the Edmonton side of this here. Much better performance than last week for them. They were in this game down the stretch. Nick Arbuckle did throw for over 300 yards in this one, but a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and their defense giving up a lot of run yards, rushing yards here, a lot through the air as well. This Chris Jones defense seems like it's still taking its time to settle in here. What do you think of the Elks' performance in this one? Let's go back to you first here, Trey.
Yeah, obviously they did a little better. It was a closer game, but still they got to stop the run. Like I said, if the winning formula is to run, to stop the winning formula, you got to stop the run, right? Yeah. So, I think they got to work on that. And again, if they manage that well, then they put these other quarterbacks in situations where they have to throw 30, 40 times to win a game. That's what Chris Jones is going to have to do. I think, again, if he had one guy who could probably turn this around, it'd probably be Chris Jones. I can't see, he's one of the more defensive-minded guys that's, kind of taken over the CFL over the last however many years he's been here. So I'm not too concerned about Edmonton. Like, I didn't think they're going to have a great year anyway. I don't think that's the point of this year. I mean, I'm sure they would love to win, but again, having one more down year and kind of rebuild, and then next year have, who knows who the free agent quarterbacks are going to be this year? Who knows what Trey Ford's going to do? Who knows any of that, right? There's so much that could change this offseason. So I don't think that they're too worried in Edmonton. Like, yeah, I'm sure Victor Cooey, I think if you heard him on the broadcast, he was having some fun there because a pick happened right when he was in the box, right? So again, I think the Edmonton's focusing on that stuff. And yes, eventually the on-field product will follow along. I don't know. Nick Arbuckle didn't do that bad. Again, if you didn't have those 2 interceptions, it could have been a whole different game, right, Mike? Like I'll give it to Mike. I don't think that team did that bad. So, right, Mike?
Yeah, to me it's interesting, right? I keep coming back to the line of Rome wasn't built in a night. Dominant football teams built by Chris Jones aren't built in a season. Unless they're the Ottawa Redblacks, they're second year in the lead and they have a ton of free agents and they all rally together and they have a couple of Grey Cup appearances and win a Grey Cup and yada, 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 always fine and dandy. But they tore this down to the absolute studs. And Chris Jones has to ask himself, who are these foundational pieces that we can work with? Once you establish who those foundational pieces are, I think you are going to be in for a much better winning way very, very soon. That being said, I think Edmonton, with all due respect, is exactly where I thought they would be through 2 weeks. Now, I didn't expect the doors to be blown off in week number 1, but for a week number 2, for a team where they are on paper, minus Kenny Lawler's ridiculous catch for a touchdown, they would be right where I thought they would be for a rebuilding team. And, to tie this to Winnipeg for a minute, their rebuild certainly wasn't overnight with this regime. In fact, it took multiple attempts, multiple non-playoff appearances, multiple heartbreaks to get to where they are. Granted, every year has probably been heartbreak since 1990 because it doesn't end up in a Grey Cup. But that being said, Rome wasn't built in a night. You need to find your foundational pieces and build off of that. And to me, this is a much better result to build off of. Remember, they still have a lot of guys on the injury list, but I think could contribute certainly. And this almost strikes me as a year for Chris Jones to say, okay, this is what we have in the cupboard. This is what we can work with, and build it in a nice, kind of steady, a nice, steady structure that's sustainable, but is a constant winner. The question is, will Chris Jones stay around once it becomes that constant winner part? I guess remains to be seen. But based on the Jones track record, year one, not great. Improvement year two and beyond. I think that's what it's going to take. But I didn't think the Elks had an on-the-field issue. Their on-the-field issue to me was a lot smaller than what they had off the field. Victor Cui to me didn't fix this thing with engagement and all that kind of stuff and get fans back in the stands. But you can't fix everything in one night, like I've said a couple times already.
Trey mentioned earlier the off-season the free agent quarterbacks available for next year. I want to sow chaos and burn the place down and suggest Bo Levi Mitchell going to a Chris Jones-led Edmonton Elks team. I think that might turn away a lot of fans around the league with that one. I don't think it would actually happen. I just want to see it happen for the chaos.
That's actually interesting because let's play the hypothetical that after a few weeks, because we kind of talked about Bo as one of those guys that might have a short leash with a backup, right? And I'm not sure, are you sure his contract's up or you're just
this is the final year of his contract,
right? So do you think because he's a prideful guy, so if he gets the chain and he's still you're holding the clipboard, he said he didn't want to go to the NFL because he didn't want to hold a clipboard. So if it's holding a clipboard in Calgary, you actually make a good point. Do you think it's a good point. I put some money on that one. Maybe there's a good chance. That's not actually as crazy as you think.
I want to see how that works out, a relationship between him and Chris Jones. This game for the Elks, I was impressed with what they did, especially, and I knew they were going to be better than that game against BC last week. There was no way they were going to give up 56 points or whatever it was a second straight week, and I think they'll get better as the season goes along. They do have some good pieces there to rally around. Kenny Lawler, 12 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. They paid him $300,000, and if you're going to do that, you got to have a guy put up monstrous games, and I think this was one of those. And as Mike mentioned, a ridiculous catch there. Kind of an interesting scenario where Edmonton let Caleb Hawley go, I think, earlier in the week. Then Darrell Walker went down due to injury, so they brought him back and put him in the starting lineup. So Caleb Hawley within a week was cut, re-added, and put up 2 catches for 51 yards with the same team. Adam saying in the YouTube chat, Ryan just wants to watch the world, or at least Alberta, burn to the ground. What's the fun of hypothetical football talk if you can't cause that, assuming you don't cause anything to actually burn to the ground in the process. So a better game for Edmonton this week, but does not lead to a win for them. Still looking for their first win of the season. In terms of our picks on the week, I believe the line was at 8 points in this one. Trey, how did we do on this?
Well, yeah, the three of us, you, me, and Adam, we all picked Saskatchewan -8, and they won by 10, so we eked it out. So actually, Adam finished at 6-2, top guy right now. But you and me are at 5-3, not bad. Still making money and got a lot of season left.
Right on. Yes, watching this game late. Riders up by 7, I think they were up by 7 at that point, and it was 1 point short, and I was going to be annoyed. But the hypothetical money I put down ended up cashing in here on this one. Let's move into We'll move on to our players of the week and our power rankings here. But first, let's take a look at our CFL fantasy leagues from this week. Trey, Adam, and myself are playing in the CFL Podcast Fantasy League this season. All three of us picked up a win this week. Adam beating Robert Daltz from the Rouge Radio Podcast. A nice win for him. Trey, you beat Rod from the Wood Cookie Sawcast. Congrats on your first win of the season as well. And I narrowly beat Brazilian Ty from the 2-0 podcast. The Elks turned the ball over just enough times late in the game for the Riders defense to pull out the win for me. So 2-0 for me, 1-1 for each of you on the season. In our podcast fantasy league, we did our draft preseason. Mike, you had the top score of the week this week. Dane Evans, Kenny Lawler, big performances from both of them, 115.9 points. What do you have to say about your team this week, Mike?
Well, it's funny, right? Because it almost seems to work that way the week where you expect the least from your team, you get the most from them. So, my hunch of keeping the lineup together for the most part was pretty successful. But long season, want to be peaking at the right time.
Right, for sure. So Adam came in second this week with 104.3 points. Jamal Morrow, the major contributor in his lineup. I had 99.1. Duke Williams' injury forced me to put Tim White in, and it worked out well with a 30-point week from him. Trey, you had 75.6 on the week. You rolled with the same lineup for the second straight week here. We'll talk a little more about fantasy picks on Wednesday, but will we see a shakeup of the roster for this coming week?
You know what, man? I've been pulling my hair out because I do not know what to do with VA right now, and I might have to figure out some I might have to pull a Tampa Bay Lightning, and do some salary cap maneuvering here to see what I can do, because I don't want to lose VA, but I don't really want him on my bench if he's not playing, right? So we got to figure something out there, but. Yeah, well, I don't know. I think the leash will be a little longer than VA had in Montreal, but it might be a shakeup, boys. Yeah, well, I was eyeing the waiver wire today. I just didn't. I was gonna wait a little bit before maybe some practices started to see who's out on the field and stuff before I went too nuts on that.
Well, if you circumvent the cap in a legal but sketchy way, you're likely to win back-to-back championships here, but the rest of us will hate you eternally for it. Adam says, let's not mention Tampa. No, I think we should. It's a great team to mention. Plays a great game of hockey once in a while, especially on a particular Monday night of June the 20th. Overall standings in our fantasy league for the season thus far, I am still in first. Adam right behind me. Mike and Trey are about 50, 60 points back, but lots of room to make up for this season. As we round out week 2, let's talk about players of the week. Let's go over to you here first, Mike. Who in the CFL is your player of the week nominee for week 2?
This might be a little bit off the board, but I'm going with Casey Sales of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. To me, very quiet game, 4 or 5 tackles, 1 big sack. Really forcing the issue as part of the defense. As it was nice to see Johnson Jeffco back as well. But I think, guys, Casey Sales will soon be in the discussion point as one of the top Bomber defenders, along with the likes of Big Hill, Jefferson, yada 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 yada. And might we not forget? And it might be a discussion point for Wednesday, but I just want to bring this up right now. The Legion of German Doom has returned. Theodor Tansen, terrific. But again, it's a defensive attack of characters. For me, everybody's pitch seemed to be rather obvious. I just felt that the performance of Casey Sales deserved some recognition.
What about you, Trey? Who's your player of the week?
You know what? I was real quick a point. I didn't even know Theatric Hansen wasn't signed. Like when I saw that signing, I was like, "Oh right, like why is he not signed?" So is it just I don't know, hold out? I guess because those guys
I believe if I was reading correctly this week, he had put football on hold to help with the situation with Ukraine, and now has gone back to play football in his side.
Okay, well, good on him then, because I was like, I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, okay, but anyway, that's gonna be good. But yeah, my player of the game or player of the week, like I talked about earlier, there's two things that are gonna win you a game: run the ball and make the damn field goals. And someone made 4 for 4 back-to-back players of the week for me. Rene Perez got 12 points for the Stamps in their comeback. The longest was 46. Another interesting point too. 4 kickoffs, averaged 63 yards, the longest being 77. So, that's a big deal in the CFL game where you pin him back. And another interesting fact, after 2 weeks, he leads the league in kickoff yards. So again, he's putting their defense in really good positions. And that's those little things, that help you win a game.
I love seeing the love for the kickers. Gotta love it. We'll see if a kicker gets your nominee next week as well. Well deserved for Rene Paradis and Casey Sales. My player of the week, I talked about him already, Kenny Lawler of the Edmonton Elks. Don't love giving player of the week to a guy, in a losing performance, but I think Lawler was that dominant. 12 catches, 149 yards, touchdown, highlight reel catch of the year thus far. On his touchdown there. We didn't expect the Elks to win this game. They made it a lot closer, I think, than maybe we thought they were going to, and Kenny Lawler was a big reason for that. I also think it's, a guy that is under a lot of pressure. He signed the highest contract of a wide receiver at $300,000. He's got a head coach and general manager in Chris Jones who doesn't like nonsense and, pushes his team to be the best. I think we've said before here on the podcast, Kenny Lawler, if he starts underperforming, I could see Chris Jones not hesitating to, shed some salary at some point, right? So kudos to Lawler for a massive performance, showing why they paid him as much as they did. We'll see what he can keep up as the weeks go along here. Adam did send in his player of the week earlier, who's also one of my honorable mentions. It's Jamal Morrow of the Riders. 17 carries, 126 yards, touchdown on the ground, 4 catches for 28. Big reason why the Riders came out with that 26-16 win. So kudos to Jamal Morrow there. Let's move on to our power rankings here. Everybody's favorite thing to discuss when it comes to the CFL. We've got our week 2 power rankings. Trey, you've got Saskatchewan at number 1, Winnipeg at 2, BC at 3, Toronto at 4, Calgary at 5, Montreal at 6, Ottawa at 7, Hamilton at 8, and the Edmonton Elks actually move up on the rankings this week. The expansion teams of the past have been, and future have been thrown out of the way, and the Elks slot in at number 9 here. What went into these rankings this week?
Honestly, before I get roasted for them, other than Edmonton moving up, they're the identical of last week. I thought the teams that won last week that won again this week didn't do much to impress me, much different than the teams that lost again. They lost. And, we talked about this in our group chat again. I hate the buys week 1 and 2. You don't know where to put BC and Toronto compared to everybody else. It's a really weird thing. I want to see more from BC before I push them up, and I do lean a little bit towards more defense than Saskatchewan and Winnipeg have played. BC's played good defense too in their one game, but I want to see 2-3 games of all things going on, and then I'll move them up. But yeah, and then the bottom half. Again, Hamilton probably would have had a big jump if they didn't lose. Montreal might have jumped up if they didn't lose. Again, I wasn't really impressed. It didn't really change. It was a weird week.
For myself, BC stays at number 1 for me, Winnipeg at 2, Saskatchewan at 3, Calgary at 4, Toronto at 5, Ottawa at 6, Hamilton at 7. I think they move up ahead of Montreal from my rankings last week. Montreal's in at 8 and Edmonton is in at 9. I kept BC number 1. I had them number 1 coming into their bye week. I kept them there because honestly, of the 4 teams that won this week, none really impressed me enough to warrant jumping ahead. They pulled out their win. Sure, Calgary's comeback and the narrow victory some of these teams pulled out was good, but it wasn't breathtaking. And so BC, I know one game against Edmonton, big win there. What else are we going to see from them? Probably they move down the rankings, I would imagine, after week 3, but we'll see. They're number 1 for me. At Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, both teams pulling out narrow victories. I give the edge here to Winnipeg because they won both of a home-and-home series, which is tough to do in the CFL. Calgary pulling out another win here for them. Kudos on the comeback. Toronto, I put as the lowest of the teams that won here, mostly because they were a 21-yard field goal that gets made 97% of the time away from losing that game to Montreal. Ottawa 0-2, but I think they've looked good. Hamilton looked better this week. Montreal, I really don't know what to expect going forward. An 0-2 start to the season, a short leash on the quarterback, a quarterback controversy, a starting running back that is out likely for the season. Lots of unknowns here for Montreal. And Edmonton, while they did play better, end up last still in my rankings for now. Mike, you have Saskatchewan in at number 1, Calgary at 2, Winnipeg at 3, BC at 4, Toronto at 5, Ottawa at 6, Hamilton number 7, Montreal number 8, and Edmonton number 9. Our first time getting your rankings here this season. How did you end up with these the way they are?
I like Saskatchewan at number 1 just for the defense, which we've already addressed. I like the pressure they're getting on the quarterback. Is very with authority. One could suggest you could put them lower because of their offense, but to me, to play defense this early in the season in general in the CFL is very hard to do. Calgary really impressed me with that comeback against Hamilton. The grittiness of their 2 victories, to me, deserve full marks. Winnipeg, I'm in the show me crowd. I think they're for real, but I just want to see a little bit more. I want to see, is Ottawa that good, or is Winnipeg that bad, or somewhere in between? Granted, it's hard to sweep a bat-to-bat, as has already been mentioned. BC, okay, 1 win, enough to give them a top 4 spot. Any higher, I'm not sure because of their bye. The other side of it is they're playing the number 9 team in my power ranking in their 1 win, which was really a discombobulated Edmonton team. Should have done what they did. BC, jury's still out on them for me. Toronto, same deal. They won that 1 game, so aren't really worthy of being put any lower on my list versus teams that had already lost games. Ottawa, to me, now this Ottawa, Hamilton, Montreal grouping to me seems interchangeable by the week. Mainly put Ottawa at 6 because if there's such a thing as impressive losses, that would be in Ottawa's category. Hamilton, see, here's the thing. If these rankings are taken at halftime of that Calgary game, I probably have Hamilton ahead of Ottawa, but because of that, I don't. And rightfully so, we base this on a 60-minute football game. Montreal, to me, okay, you lost that game at Calgary. Again, you had a lead late in that game. You let Bo get that one, and then the missed field goal. Like, if Montreal cleans up, their mistakes, their ways to lose football games, Montreal will probably be ahead of Winnipeg on my list. But the big mistakes costing this team right now, you could make an argument Hamilton and Montreal could be flipped in my rankings, but decided to give Hamilton the benefit of the doubt based on previous track record. And, Edmonton's not that long lost number 1, but that long lost number 9. But again, I think there's a sizable difference between Ottawa, Hamilton, Montreal, and Edmonton. We'll see over the course of time if they can maybe close that gap a little bit.
Adam sent in his power rankings as well. They're pretty much the same as Mike's, except Winnipeg and Calgary flipped. So Saskatchewan at number 1, Winnipeg at 2, Calgary at number 3, BC number 4, Toronto number 5, Ottawa 6, Hamilton 7, Montreal 8, and Edmonton 9. If you want to hear more on Adam's power rankings, you can find him on Twitter at AdamStewart1 and talk with him there about those, or join us for our preview show Wednesday night and put your comments in the chat there. Before we take a look at what's to come here on the podcast and wrap things up, anything else on week 2 you guys want to discuss, or should we get into wrapping things up here?
Yeah, really quickly, I know that this may be a topic that Trey wanted to get into, but I found it on the group chat, and I thought it was a pretty good addition. Really quickly, Ryan, can I get you to put the power rankings up for just a minute here while I kind of explain this? So. I have to wonder, we talked about the pressure, let's say Montreal to win based on what their owner has said publicly. Hamilton back-to-back Grey Cups, they're 0-2. That kind of scenario. Have we been able to formulate, and I'd like to hear from kind of both of you on this scenario. We talked about coach hot seats very early in the season. Which team do we think has the hottest seat as far as if there's a coach in the lead but that's fired tomorrow, who's it more likely to be or least likely to be? I guess my question is, of the teams that are not doing well 2 weeks into the season, whose seat is the hottest in your mind? Like, I have a team in my mind, but I just want to see what you guys have to say.
Yeah, I'll kick. I have to say it's Khari Jones as his pants are almost on fire, I think. But right, I mean, I think so because looking at the other teams, Ottawa, I think Lapo will have some leash. Hamilton, you're not going to get rid of coach. Oh, like I said, I think in our group chat, I thought I saw somebody talk about it on Twitter, but Twitter, there's 1,000 different opinions all day. So I don't know what's actual fact and just someone's opinion. Right. And then Edmonton, I said in our group chat, I think they can go 0-18 and Chris Jones will be fine for the year. Like you said, it takes a season or two to build that team and defense. So I have to go with Khari. Maybe I would have thrown Dinwiddie in there if they had lost that game. But again, they only had one game. So I would have given him, it's Khari, and then I would say Dinwiddie probably should have done better in that game than a field goal. But Ryan?
Yeah, for me, same way. I can't see any of these other coaches here losing their job potentially besides Khari Jones. You mentioned Chris Jones already. Like I see him sticking it out in Edmonton unless he himself decides to leave. Hamilton, slow start to the season, sure, but I think they're going to bounce back. Lapolice has a whole new football team. You give them a year, I think, right? Next year, if it's a bad year this year and next year they start slow, okay, maybe. Toronto just went to the East Final last year. That's probably enough to give Dinwiddie a leash here. Dave Dickinson in Calgary, that would be wild. Craig Dickinson in Saskatchewan. I don't think there's any way, even if they start slow, the Riders are firing a coach in a year. They're hosting the Grey Cup, and they're not starting slow. They got a 2-0 start to the season here and a solid start to the year. Same thing with Winnipeg, Mike O'Shea, and BC, Rick Campbell. BC, yeah, one win to start the season here. Let's say they lose 5-6 straight. Here's Rick Campbell on the hot seat. I don't think so. You got a young quarterback starting here that you've been dealt with by your general manager, and a pretty overhauled team here as well. So, long-winded answer, Khari Jones to me. We've seen the desperation moves. We've seen the comments from his GM and his owner. Is the one clearly on the hot seat to me. Mike?
Are the pants a little cooler, to steal a line from whoever just said it, by the fact that nobody in the East Division is necessarily pulling away with this thing? I mean, you look at it, you're just as close to the top as you are to the bottom. Granted, you're 0-2, but a couple losses to Saskatchewan, and that's a change of opinion. I saw a comment here. I think it was from Adam. Montreal Mitchell's are right there in the waiting, and Stern wants a winner. I think if they lose both the stats, the change could happen. that's something that I haven't even thought of until you just mentioned it. Machilcha, the last coach, believe it or not, to win 3 road playoff games before the Bombers did it back in 19. So, yeah, I'm not sure. But the idea is there. But let's let this play out a bit. That's just my theory. Um, it's amazing the amount of overreactions and reactions we could make based on one or two games, and it's an interesting kind of storylines to watch over the next couple recaps, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be jobless long if it does happen, though, right? Like, I know there's no head
Right.
coaching jobs open, but even if he does, I could see him landing somewhere mid-season. I mean, I know there's a coach cap now, so it might be tough to fix that around, but like, I think he'll definitely get that shot as an OC or something next year, right? So it might not be the worst idea. Maybe he just needs to change up a scenery again. I wouldn't. I don't want to get rid of Buck Pierce, but I'd love to see him back in Winnipeg. I think that would be pretty cool too, right? So I wouldn't mind. Like, there's a little part of me that wants him to get fired, so maybe he can go somewhere else and do something different if it's not working in Montreal. But yeah, like, I don't know who else you could actually really point a finger to. None of the West is going to get fired.
Well,
And
it's interesting. It's interesting, Trey, you mentioned that because there's been guys who have first year or first chance head coaches who and we've seen this in the NFL from time to time. They become a head coach the first time, they don't necessarily have the success. They're in their job, they get removed, they go back to be an OC, and then 2-3 years later hone their craft and become a head coach again, and fairly uh fairly significant run as a head coach. It's interesting because that head coach thing, to me, it's not just plug and play. To make a coaching change, expect instant results, it's not going to happen. A lot of coaches don't win out of the lead unless you're Dave Dickinson. Granted, he was with the team for a while, so his record, notwithstanding, that was a pretty dead. Okay, here's the cards running pretty well from John Hufnagel. Orlando Steinhauer, to me, would be that coach that makes an immediate impact as far as winning right away. But historically, just look at Michael Shea in Winnipeg. Took them a long time to get. Granted, he had a long leash to get things to where they are now. But just because you fire the coach doesn't instantaneously mean results. And I think that's why firing the coach in season rarely works unless you pull a St. Louis Blues of the NHL. But football's not hockey. It's a 9-team circuit as well. So it's just very interesting, right? It's do you fire a coach just for the sake of firing a coach? Statistics tell you, but that's not an automatic shot in the arm either. So there's a lot of calculations that kind of have to go with it.
I was just going to add, because it's Khari Jones and he's not as maybe popular in Montreal, could you imagine if he was a head coach, say, Winnipeg, where, he's kind of the guy and then you decide to fire him after 2 games? But in Montreal, you got, a new owner, a guy who's not, probably recognizable to CFL fans, but not Alouette fans necessarily as much. And because I don't believe he played there. He played mostly Winnipeg and BC, right? So I think that's a big aspect too. Do you think you'd fire a guy like Jones in Winnipeg? Probably not, right? The outcry would be for Wade Miller or Kyle Walter's job probably after that. Like, why are you firing one of the best quarterbacks we've had here over the last 2 decades? So I think it's really interesting, and I think coaches in a lot of sports get a short leash when they don't deserve it, right? You talk about the St. Louis Blues one, like, that was a great one, but that's maybe the only time it's happened, right? We don't see it very often, and then again, you have the 2 extremes. Then with being a Jets fan, you see we've only had 2 coaches in however long, right? And maybe Trotz, yeah, let's go. But it's a tough thing to balance because, like, yes, if he gets the coaching change and Machado leads them to the Grey Cup and everything's great, that'll be the story of the year. But what would the story be if they do it? Machado comes in and they go 0-18, right? Like, what was the point? Like, at least Khari could have got them to 0-18, right?
And I think just to kind of put up on this discussion, I think it's interesting, right? Because, there's that segment of people that suggest that, not to say that Kahari Jones had a legacy. Well, he had a legacy in Winnipeg, let me tell you. 2001, 14-4, Kahari Jones, Milt Tito. Kahari Jones was the quarterback of some good bomber teams but never won the Grey Cup. People say that Kahari Jones doesn't need to do this. He, has made a legacy for himself as a player. I think there's a lot of pride in Kahari Jones. You listen to Kahari Jones, he wants to better himself. He wants to better his team. Personally, that's just my opinion. I hope Montreal does not fire Kahari Jones. Kahari Jones, CFL needs more Kahari Joneses in the CFL. He is one of the nicest gentlemen. I don't advocate for firing coaches. Kahari Jones, you're going to be okay. Things are going to be okay in Montreal. Stick with it. Find your quarterback. Believe in yourself. You're going to win some games. I'll tell you what, I will be very disappointed if Kahari Jones is out of a job in Montreal.
And we'll keep on waiting and we'll keep on watching here on our weekly recaps to see if there are any coaches that end up on the hot seat and out of a job here throughout the season as well. Well, let's wrap things up here and take a look at what's to come here on the podcast. Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Winnipeg time, 8 p.m. Saskatchewan. Convert to other time zones accordingly. It's the CFL Weekly Preview live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, also on the Game Time TV YouTube page. Shout out to our presenting sponsors, Game Time TV. Trey, Adam, and I will be here. We'll talk storylines of every game coming up this next week. We'll talk through all the best CFL fantasy options, and we'll make our best bets of the week and our picks as well. So lots of fun there. And then Monday night next week, we're back with the weekly recap. Same place, same time, 9 p.m. Winnipeg time, 8 p.m. Saskatchewan, other time zones accordingly. And we'll do the same thing we did here tonight. Recap the games, players of the week, update our power rankings, and maybe take a look at the coaching hot seat there as well. Once again, of course, you can subscribe over on YouTube to get all of the content. We appreciate all those who tuned in live here tonight, all the great comments in the chat. We always enjoy those as well. You can find the podcast on social media. On Facebook, it's the Canadian Football Countdown. On Twitter, at CF Countdown Pod. Make sure you check out all the other great shows from around the Canadian Football Podcast Network as well, at CF Pod Network on Twitter. Guys, where can people find you on social media? Let's start with you, Trey.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at TreyMBHarness. If you ever want to talk football, talk anything, like I said to you guys, you probably saw me posting nonstop horse racing this weekend. That's my main thing. So I'm always on Twitter. I'm never not on Twitter. So always reach out to me there. Back to you, or Mike.
Yeah, sorry, Dash. You can find me on Twitter at MikeGerl, MikeGerl. And you can find my work at facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB for the time being.
Ooh, little teaser there from Mike of perhaps changes to come. Stay tuned for that. You can find me on Twitter at CooperTrooper42, talking anything CFL fantasy related, maybe a little hockey, Stanley Cup finals. I think I have a tweet to send Adam's way here. You can find Adam on Twitter at AdamStewart1 as well. If you want to talk any CFL farming, etc. with him as well. Whatever podcast platform you're listening or watching on, we appreciate it if you do all the fun things like comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends. Help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. And on behalf of our panel tonight, Michael Gerald, Trey Colbeck, I'm Ryan Coop saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.